Our original plan was to leave Cairo in buses on December 28th or 29th. The buses were blocked from coming to the appointed place by the Egyptian government. The charter bus companies were told, don't you dare go and take them. People who went by taxi to make the long journey from Cairo to Rafah were stopped on the way, sometimes at the Suez Canal, and turned back. A group of about 30 people who reached Al Arish, the last town in Egypt before the border with Rafah, were blockaded in their hotel for several days. Later, the Viva Palestina convoy, which had traveled through several countries and finally reached the port of Aqaba in Jordan and planned to take the ferries across from Aqaba to the Egyptian town of Nuweiba, was told, you cannot cross here. Never was there a moment when it would have been more appropriate for the Red Sea to part, but it did not oblige at that moment. And the Egyptians actually told the convoy of hundreds of people and about 150 vehicles, most of them ambulances being donated to Gaza by people all over the world, that they had to go back up through Jordan, through Syria, and then sail from Laodikia in Syria to Al Arish through the Mediterranean, and then they could drive to Gaza. A completely absurd, Kafkaesque, pointless demand, but they did it. There is no ferry service from Syria to Al Arish, so whereas there's a regular car ferry from Aqaba to Nuweiba, they had to load the vehicles onto a cargo ship in Syria and then charter an airplane to take the people. So these were the obstacles that were put in people's way of reaching Gaza. Instead of, once we discovered that it was impossible for us to go to Gaza as a group, we decided to stay in Cairo and to hold demonstrations there. We decided to hold a symbolic march to Gaza, starting in Maidan al-Tahrir in front of the Egyptian Museum. We held a demonstration with Egyptian solidarity groups at the Journalists Syndicate in Cairo, and other actions. The first protest in many years to be held in front of the Israeli embassy was held during that week. On one particular day, I think it was December 29th, a group of Americans, several dozen Americans, decided to go and visit the United States Embassy. And our purpose was very simple, to ask our representatives in the embassy to facilitate our travel to Gaza and to ask Egypt to open the border for this civil society solidarity initiative. What happened is we were actually detained in front of the US Embassy, right at the first checkpoint. There's sort of a street, and there's a barrier, and then there's another barrier, and then another one. And we were detained just inside the first checkpoint for about 6 hours, surrounded by riot police and intelligence. In the full view of the embassy. Nobody was allowed to leave. It was very clear that we were being held hostage, and we were told by the Egyptian intelligence that, in fact, this was caught on film by Sam Husseini, an Egyptian police general, said, the embassy has told us to keep you here. We were also told separately that unless we all agreed to leave and disperse separately and leave the place, no one was allowed to leave. So if you needed to use the bathroom, if you needed to eat, there was at least one elderly person who was not feeling well. They were physically prevented from leaving. Neither were they allowed to visit the embassy. It is our right as US citizens to visit our embassies overseas. Finally, 3 of us were permitted. People were quite strong and decided that we would stay together and we would demand to be admitted to the embassy. Finally, they agreed to allow 3 of us in. I was one of them. Medea Benjamin and Kit Kettridge was the 3rd person. I wrote about this on the Electronic Intifada. And we had a meeting with the senior political officer at the embassy. We had a long discussion. We wanted to know why the United States would not support us going to Gaza. And one of the things we learned, it's public knowledge, but we really wanted to discuss it with them, is that not only is the United States not supportive of us going to Gaza, it's actually helping Egypt. The United States Army Corps of Engineers is helping Egypt to build an underground steel barrier to tighten the siege on Gaza and to prevent people living there under blockade from digging tunnels, which have become, in a sense, the last lifeline for people there. What we experienced during this period was very frustrating, angering, a sense that overwhelming powers could frustrate our smallest move. But I think it would have been an infinitesimal sense of frustration compared with what people in Gaza feel. And that, I think, was something I'm grateful for, to have been able to share that sentiment of 1.5 million people who are literally blockaded in Gaza. What we discovered, in a sense, is that Gaza is really harder to visit than a maximum security prison. And therefore, we often talk about 10,000 Palestinian political prisoners being held by Israel. That's true in the sense of what we think of as traditional prison-type institutions or prison camps. But in reality, Gaza is the world's largest prison. This is not just rhetoric. It's not an analogy or a metaphor. It is literally true. It is literally the world's largest prison. And because this blockade, the people in Gaza are innocent, they have not committed any crime for which they deserve this punishment, they are political prisoners. So tell Amnesty International, who have been active on this issue, but if we want to talk about prisoners of conscience or political prisoners, there are 1.5 million of them in Gaza. Why did we consider it so important to go and try to break this siege? You will know that just over a year ago, Israel bombarded Gaza for 22 days. The pretext of this, it was a false pretext. I won't go into this in great detail now, but if someone wants to challenge me in the Q&A, I would be very happy to demonstrate the utter fabrication that this was in retaliation for rockets being fired at Israel. Regardless, what the population of Gaza, the Palestinian population in Gaza was subjected to was something quite extraordinary. Some of the examples that really have stuck with me, you can talk about the more than 15,000 private homes that were damaged to such an extent that 100,000 people had to leave them. There are still several thousand homes that are completely destroyed. According to an estimate by the European Union,